Session on geocoding in ATLAS. This brief training is going to provide a demonstration of the basics of working with Google Earth and ATLAS.ti so that you can begin the process of linking other objects in your hermeneutic unit or your HU to specific locations in Google Earth. And then also use the ATLAS.ti interface to reference locations that are relevant to your own research projects and your own specific research questions. So just something to keep in mind is that this is kind of more of a demo than a hands-on training. We do some other hands-on training. So it's going to go by a little bit faster pace than a hands-on workshop might, but at least by the end of it you should feel comfortable in at least knowing what types of things are possible when working with Google Earth in ATLAS.ti. So like Dr. Contreras said, I'll probably speak for 45 minutes. It's been tough to get all of this down to 1 hour, so this is kind of an experiment with that, so bear with us. And then the last 10 minutes, I think maybe, Ricardo, if you can just keep an eye on, maybe, pull out a selection of questions. If people are typing questions into that question panel, then we can address a selection of them at the end.
Yes.
I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. So basically the first thing you need to know is that Google Earth works in ATLAS.ti by accessing the Google Earth servers from your computer. So for that reason you need to be connected to the internet for it to work. The second important thing you need to know is that it's always easiest to create all of the objects that you want to work with in Google Earth first before bringing them into ATLAS.ti.
Kristin?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I have someone who is asking if you could speak a little bit slower, okay? She is maybe from another country, so she would like you speak a little bit slower. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Okay, well, I'll go back over that then. So the first important thing you need to know is that Google Earth works in ATLAS.ti by accessing the Google Earth server. So you need to be connected to the internet in order for Google Earth to work within ATLAS.ti. So the second important thing you need to know is that it's always easiest to create all of the objects that you want to work with in Google Earth first before bringing them into ATLAS.ti. The Google Earth interface it's a lot more user-friendly for creating geographical objects. So you want to start working in Google Earth first, and then later I can show you how to import those objects that you've created in Google Earth into your HU in ATLAS.ti. And then you can begin the process of linking them to other objects once they're there. You have the option of starting within ATLAS.ti and working directly from within ATLAS.ti first, but it's much, much easier and recommended to begin working in Google Earth first. So let me just open up Google Earth here. So this is the Google Earth interface. Some of you might have tried to play with it already. So these are the basic controls are that you can zoom in and out. So let's just go to, you would type in a certain location, and let's just say Grand Canyon. Okay, so if you type in a location and search, it will go there. I'll explain this side panel that we're looking at too in a second. So once you're there, you can zoom in and out. So here's the Grand Canyon that we're looking at. So you can zoom in and out using these controls here. You can go up and down this way and that way, so north to south, east to west. And then you can also use this orientation. So you can change the orientation where you're pointing north or maybe you're pointing south. And as well, you can also change the lateral or horizontal view. So if you keep on going laterally, horizontally, you'll end up seeing the sky at some point. Okay, so let's just zoom into the Grand Canyon again. You can also select the screen itself and move it around this way. Okay, so you also have there are a number of objects. So just as you have objects in ATLAS.ti, you also have objects in Google Earth. And there are a lot of things you can do with Google Earth that you could probably spend a lifetime learning, but I'll show you the basic things today that will be really useful for working in ATLAS.ti. So these are, you have something called place marks. So that is anytime you designate any kind of location that you want to come back to or that you want to mark on the map, then you would form a place mark. Then you have something called polygons, where that's when you draw a perimeter around a certain space on geographical space on Google Earth or on the map. You also have something called pathways, so you can create a path between two or more spots on a map. And those pathways can be useful for doing walkthroughs or creating pathways where, some trajectories of your participants in a study or things like that. You can also create an image overlay where you create an image and it literally just maps onto the Google Earth interface. So it lies kind of on top of the geographical space there. And you can also create a tour. So you create a tour out of different place marks, you can create a tour out of any of these objects. So once you group a number of objects together, you can show a tour going from one of those to the next. You also have something called layers. So let's just go to San Francisco now. That's a good way to illustrate some layers. So this side panel that you're looking at, you have something called places, and you also have layers here. And then this top panel, it's basically reserved for ads. You can get Google Earth Premium, and then you won't have any of these ads, but basically whatever you type into here, you don't even have to have the exact address of anything. You just type in something, and it Googles it in the same way that you would just go to google.com. And so then you get some ads here, and you can always squeeze these ads out of the way, but they will keep coming back, unfortunately. So, okay, so now we're in San Francisco, and let's zoom in a little bit using these controls. Okay, so the thing about layers here is that the layers, if you check and uncheck these things, borders and labels just show you kind of political boundaries. If you click on places, it'll start showing you anything from aquariums to restaurants to anything that a Google user has shared with the Google Earth. Let's see. So you can see all of these little icons popping up here. And when you hover over them, you can see the label there. There's also photos that people have taken in Google Earth. So let me just zoom in here. Anytime you click on any of these photos, you'll be able to see photos that people have added. There's also roads, and there's also 3D buildings. So 3D buildings, you'll see, takes up a lot of operating kind of space on your computer. So if your computer is bogged down for whatever reason, you might want to take these 3D buildings off. But what it does allow you to do is see it's a really neat view. You see how these buildings are in 3D. If you take that off, then it changes the view there. And you can play around with the ocean and weather, but the main ones are these top four. You can also do a street view. So if you hover over here and go to the little orange man, you can put the orange man pretty much anywhere you want. Right? So, but it has to be on a street, and it has to be in a place where Google Earth, the Google Earth, and the people for Google Earth have come through and taken pictures of things. So if you do a street view, then you can see here what your view might be. Okay, so how to create a place mark. If you exit the street view, let's go ahead and create a place mark. So you would do that by selecting this icon. You can also do that by clicking Add in the drop-down menu, and there's different ways to get at that. So I'm just going to put Institute for Community Research. That's where I work in Hartford. Okay, so if you have to zoom there first. I should have said that. So you have to, the typical way of moving around in Google Earth is by flying, so by zooming into something. So let's just say we're going to zoom into Institute for Community Research. Like I said, I don't have to have the correct address. I can just type that in and it knows where to go. All right, so the Institute for Community Research in Hartford, Connecticut. If I want to create a place mark there, I would go to this icon or go to Add Place Mark. Okay, so once it's there, the first thing you want to do is name it. So I will call it Institute for Community Research. And we'll talk about how to add descriptions to these things in just a second. But so you can change the style of the icon. You can make it any of these that you want. We'll just leave it yellow icon right now. You can change the style and color of the icon as well. So this would change the color of the text here, And you can also change the color of the icon here, either to match it or something different. And view is very important here. So what you want to do is get the view the way that you want it to be, because you're creating a place mark for this place, and every time you double click on it in the side panel back here, it's going to take you to whatever view you decide you know, is what you want it to look like. Okay, so maybe I want to zoom here because I want to see a little bit of downtown. Then what you would do is snapshot that current view and then click OK. And so now every time you double click on it, this is the view you'll get. So that's how to create a place mark. So how you write a description for a place mark is you would right click on this. So right click on the place mark that you just created and go down to properties. This is on a PC, but it should be in Get Info on a Mac. So if any of you are working on a Mac, it's slightly different controls, but they're basically in the same places. So then you would write a description. So this is where research is conducted in the Hartford community on HIV and drug abuse prevention, or something to that effect, right? So you can write in your description there. And descriptions are very important. They have implications for working in ATLAS.ti because your descriptions on each of these place marks become comments on your quotations later on. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right. So let's go ahead and create one thing to do. So you're basically going to be working in Google Earth and importing all of these things into ATLAS.ti later. So you want to get it set up so that you're really doing most of the work here in Google Earth so that you can just import it into ATLAS.ti later on. And a great way to do that is to first just create a project folder. Just as you would create a project folder for your overall HU, you're sort of creating a project folder within Google Earth that you're then going to export into ATLAS.ti. So the way to do that is you can just go to Add Folder. You can also right-click in the space here and go to Add Folder here. So let's just call it our project folder. And you can give it any kind of description that you want. So this is where we describe our project. Okay. And then you click OK. So whatever you do here, you're creating a new folder here, and you can drag and drop things underneath that folder. So all of the things that we're going to be creating just now will be under this project folder. We want to make sure that they're in that project folder before we start to export into ATLAS.ti. Okay, so we know how to create a place mark. Let's go ahead and add a polygon. So first we want to, remember you want to fly to the place first. Actually, let's go ahead and create an overlay. Overlays are kind of interesting. So you want to fly to the place first. Let's go to Paris, France. Why not? So let's say that I have a hand-drawn map of the arrondissement in Paris, France, and I want to overlay that map over the entire city. And this is really useful too if you're working in the community and you want, people do community hand-drawn maps of the community. This is really useful for that as well. So you can see that there's a lot of things on the screen right now. So in order to keep so many things from being on the screen, that's when you really want to manipulate your layers here. So if you take off photos, that detracts some things. If you take off roads, it takes off all of those interstates. You can choose to take off places if you want. Let's just look at the kind of political borders here. So we want to know exactly where Paris, France is. And my map that I'm going to create is on my computer. It's stored, preferably you should put all of these things in your overall HU project folder first. And that way you know where they're at. You can, just as you would create a project folder and create subfolders for your primary documents and maybe some outputs, you can also create subfolders for maps or photos or anything like that. And as long as you keep them in your project folder, then you know where they are at, right? Okay, so let's create an overlay by selecting this. So what we're going to do is first give it a name. I'll say Paris arrondissement. And then I'm going to browse to that location on my computer. Okay, so finding it in my project folder. And you see it's a kind of roughly drawn, hand-drawn map of this. So the trick here is that you want to get the view in the background right first from the start. You know, take a look at your photo first, the photo that you want to overlay, or the hand-drawn map that you want to overlay, and make sure that you know what it looks like first so that you can rearrange your orientation in the background so that it's suitable. You can also change the opacity of this. So you want to be able to see the background a little bit in order to be able to correctly place that map onto that location. And so what you'd want to do is find a kind of telltale marker in the background. And in this case, the Seine, the river going through Paris, is a pretty good matchup with this river. So you can stretch things out a little bit, right? Write a description. This is a hand-drawn map of Paris. And then you would want to get the view proper, however you want it. Adjust the opacity a little bit so you can see the arrondissement behind. Snapshot current view, click OK, and then when you zoom out of this, it stays there, and then when you double click on this, it will go to whatever view that you snapshot. And you just want to make sure that that object then remains in your project folder, and you can also change the order of these things as well. Okay, so that's an overlay. Now let's create a polygon. And let's go back to America. Let's go back to Central Park, New York City. All right, so we're flying back to New York. And I'm using fun locations that are just sort of random, and of course all of your locations will be more strategic and related in some way to your research questions. That seems obvious. So for our polygon, you would just select the polygon, so add polygon. First thing you want to do, of course, is name it again, because you don't want to have a bunch of unnamed polygons, because remember, all of these things are going to be represented in ATLAS.ti as well. So the more you can add rich titles and comments, then the better. So we'll say Central Park, and you can then, you see this little square, you can just draw a shape around the location on the map. And you can also change the color, so you can change the color of the perimeter. If you want it to be orange, you can also change the color of the inside. All right, and you can change the opacity as well if you would want to just be able to see through it a little bit, and you can change the view as well. And remember that Snapshot Current View is your best friend. It's going to tell you exactly what that location is and how you want that view to be. Okay, so now we've created a polygon, and you can add a description as well. And all of your descriptions, by the way, show up in the side panel, and once again, they'll show up as comments once you put them into ATLAS.ti. All right, so for a pathway, you can see that the creation of these objects is very similar for each of them. So a pathway, let's go to Bourbon Street in New Orleans. That's always a fun place to go. And actually you would have to zoom there first. So let's zoom there first. And all of these things are being saved. In my case, they're being saved under My Places, and but they might be saved under temporary places. So just make sure that you know where you're creating these place marks and other objects, and make sure that they're, before you close out of Google Earth, that you want to bring them up into My Places rather than leaving them in temporary places, because you'll lose them there. Okay, so let's zoom how we want the view to look here. We're going to create a pathway of typical tourist trajectories in Bourbon Street. So let's say this is going to be the pathway that people take from Bourbon Street down to get to the water through the French Quarter. So we'll say, give it a name, Bourbon Street Tourism. This is where tourists go in the French Quarter. Okay, and we've got our view kind of the way we want it to be. So now we just have to draw it. We have to draw the pathway, and you can make the pathway as zigzaggy or as straightforward as you want. So let's just pretend that this is a typical pathway, a typical trajectory that people take in Bourbon Street. And we want to change the color, so we want to make it as visible as possible. So you click OK, and you can also change the width. So you can type it in that way, or you can just use the up and down. So if you click OK, then you see this French Quarter trajectory. And now that creates the whole nother object. And you can tell which type of object it is by the icon that's next to it. And you can also see a brief little quotation for it. So if you double click on this, you'll be able to see the description here and the title there, right? So that's a pathway. And then you can also do create something called a tour, or if you wanted to do a kind of walkthrough. It's very interesting to do a walkthrough, especially if you're doing any kind of community research and you're doing any outreach. It's always interesting to do a tour or a walkthrough through the community. And the way that you would do this is if you create a folder like this, right? So here's our project folder, and all of these objects exist underneath our project folder. If you look at this folder icon down here and select that, it will take you on a tour of all the objects that you've created under that project folder, right? So the project folder is sort of the overarching tour, and all of these things are points within that tour. And all you would have to do is make sure that project folder is selected, and then click on this, click on the folder, and it will go to each of those locations. And you can always adjust to, if you go to Preferences or Options, you can always adjust under the Navigation tab. You can adjust the fly to speed. So sometimes people want to fly there really, really quickly. You can also adjust the time at which you rest in each location. And it's really important to rest long enough to adjust where you're taking them. So as this is going along, you can also create a tour. You can record this tour and use it as its own object. So right now what we're looking at is a tour through each of these objects, but you can create an entire tour object out of that as well. And you can also do a voiceover. So you see as it's flying through, you can pause it here, or you can loop it. But if I click on this, then I can start recording a tour. So I can do a voiceover. You can also put music to it if you want to get extra fancy. So as I'm recording, as I'm speaking, it's actually recording, and then I would play that tour again with my voiceover. And it goes through it the rest of the way. And if you want to save that, then you can just click on the Save button here, and it comes up as an untitled tour. So of course you would want to give it a name again, and this would just be, let's just say, random sites, and then give it some kind of description and click on OK, and now you have that as a tour. All right, and then you can stop recording here. All right, so you see how it recorded my voice there. Close this. So those are the main objects. Those are the main objects in Google Earth that you're going to be creating as places that you want to come back to in ATLAS.ti, that you can then start linking them to things in ATLAS.ti. So the way that you would export these things is, the easiest way to do it is, like I said, by creating that project folder, and that project folder will contain everything else, so you don't need to export things one by one. You can just export them with your project folder. And you would right-click on this, and then you can either save that place as, so you would save it, and the format that it gets saved in is called a KMZ file. So if you look here where it says projectfolder.kmz, KMZ file is just a file it contains all of the information that you created in Google Earth, and you can then transfer it to other people you can email it to people who have Google Earth, and then they can open it on their Google Earth, and then it would unfold all of these great place marks and other objects you've created. So then you would navigate to your project folder, save this KMZ file under your project folder. I'm not going to do it now just for time's sake, but that's how you would export it. You can also sign into Google Earth So if I wanted to sign in here, then I would just put in my email and I would type in my password, and now I'm signed into Google Earth. And now you can share things via email, or you can also share it with the Google Earth community, which is something you can choose to do or choose not to do depending on your distribution of data. So now that we have our KMZ folder saved into our project folder, now we can go to working in ATLAS.ti. So how does all of this get imported into ATLAS.ti? That's probably what we all want to know. So let's just look at the ATLAS.ti interface here. So I have a number of primary documents here, and this is kind of a sample HU based on injection drug users in Hartford, Connecticut. So I have some interview data here. I also have a KMZ file that I've imported from Google Earth. I have some photos of some different neighborhoods, and I also have a video file. And you can have any types of files you want and be able to link any of these quotations that you create in different file types to Google Earth quotations. So the way that it looks like in Google Earth is you can create a new Google Earth document in ATLAS.ti. And the way that you would do that is go to Documents, New, then go to New Google Earth PD. And it looks like nothing happened, right? But it actually did. So if you go to your primary documents, now we see that we have an extra Google Earth PD. Don't worry about the fact that it's P11. I was playing around with it earlier and deleted P10, so that's why it's not in order. But so the first thing you would want to do is, of course, rename this. And renaming and commenting is crucial when you're working with multimedia files because it by default gives it the same name. So you wouldn't want a bunch of PD files all named Google Earth, right? So you'd want to say, Hartford or something like that. Whatever you want to label that primary document as. And then when you double click on it, it says ATLAS.ti is positioning the camera. Close this. And so this is what it does. It basically opens up Google Earth within your ATLAS.ti interface. And so it also brings in all of the things that we just created in Google Earth, because Google Earth is still open on your computer. If you choose to close out of Google Earth and save or delete any of these place marks and objects, they won't automatically come up. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I kept it. I didn't close out of Google Earth because I wanted these things imported. Okay, so now you have your P11 here that we just created. So this is primary document 11, and the really important thing to keep in mind with primary documents in Google Earth is that they are just empty containers until you actually start bringing in different objects, different place marks, polygons, paths, tours, and so on. Then it's just an empty document, right? So what you would want to do is fly to a place. Let's just say, because this is an injection drug use study, we'd maybe want to go to Vancouver where they have lots of harm reduction. And then you can fly there. And so whatever you see on the screen then will be, you'll form a quotation out of that, what you see on the screen. Okay, so we have primary document 11. I guess in this case I should have called it Vancouver. So let's just change that real quick. So we've got primary document 11, go to rename. Right, so this is where you would modify things. You would modify it by modifying it within the primary document manager and not within this, within the Google Earth interface, because what you would want to do is once these objects are in ATLAS.ti, then you use the ATLAS.ti controls in order to change or modify any of these objects. But if you do it first within Google Earth, then you should get it how you want in Google Earth first and then import it. It's much easier to do that, right? Okay, so we see Vancouver here, and what we would want to do is make a snapshot out of this. So we're creating a new quotation. So if you select new from quotation, new from quotation, or new from selection, then this now creates a new quotation. And if you go to your quotation manager, then you'll see 11.1. It's called Vancouver. You can rename that if you want here. And now, instead of writing a description on it, using the kind of description tool that we saw in Google Earth, this is where you would use that space to write a description. So this is where you describe Vancouver or whatever site, whatever quotation you're working with here. All right, so all of those descriptions now are in the language of ATLAS.ti. Now they are comments. So, and by default, it gives every quotation just Google Earth and then the number, the PD number and the number of this is the first quotation in primary document 11. So you'd want to really use those descriptions and comments and renaming systems in a way that's going to help you navigate and identify, which and distinguish between your quotations. So another thing to keep in mind is that once you create any kind of objects here in ATLAS.ti, what you would want to do is, in order for them to show up here in your interface, you would have to go down to miscellaneous and update Google Earth PD. And what that does is it injects this information into Google Earth by reloading it. Okay, so whenever you click on that, you'll be able to see this quotation here underneath our primary document 11, and you'll also be able to see this ATLAS.ti icon. And we've just formed what's basically the equivalent of a place mark. But you can think of it now as a quotation, and that's what it is. And you can see your comment on that quotation here. So within this file structure, you have, we have our overarching folder here, which is just Geo-coding demo. We have our primary document 11, and now we have our quotation underneath it as well. The problem with working in ATLAS.ti this way and creating objects from scratch in ATLAS.ti is that you have to reload the primary document and re-inject this information into Google Earth every time you want it to show up either here in the main interface or if you want it to show up here in the side panel. And so that gets kind of cumbersome. You want, you don't want to have to reload every time you create something. And that's really why it's much more user-friendly to work from Google Earth first and then import all of these place marks and other objects into Google Earth or into ATLAS.ti. All right, so once it is in there, we actually have, let's look at our primary documents again. So I have this KMZ file, right? I have primary document 5. If I double click on this, then it will show up in the background. Okay, so you can kind of see the folder structure as well down here. Here we go. So primary document 5, this is Hartford, Connecticut. I'm going to double click on this, and so I have all of these quotations that are my drug use locations. Let's go to one here. All right, so it'll show the description there. And you can move around. So this is a dynamic interface, but what you're seeing now is whenever I clicked Snapshot View in Google Earth, these are the views that I was clicking through, that I was setting there. You can also see the comments here in this box. I don't know why it's doing this funny thing. I've seen this on multiple computers, so it depends on how much RAM probably you have going. What your computer is able to process will affect what you see on the screen here. All right, so if you wanted to, we figured out how to save a KMZ file from Google Earth, right? And now if you wanted to import that into ATLAS.ti, what you would do is go to Documents, New, and rather than going to New Google Earth PD, because now you're bringing in, a KMZ file from Google Earth, you'd want to go to Assign External Documents. Excuse me. So if you go to Assign External Documents, then you would navigate to your project folder. And like I said, it's always good to have these things in your project folder first. maybe make a subfolder called KMZ files, and that's where you would import it, right? So this is in the language of ATLAS.ti a linked file or an assigned file, and that's something that was much more common in earlier versions of ATLAS.ti in 6.2. Not so much now in version 7 where we have managed files, but in order to bring a KMZ file into ATLAS.ti, you have to assign it as an external document. And when you do, this is what it will look like. It'll have the primary document with all of it'll have your folder actually. So this would be the folder, and then it would have all of the quotations underneath it. Okay, so the way that I know I'm running short on time, so I'm going to move ahead to coding, because we all probably want to know, once we have our quotations in there, how do we actually code these things with all of the concepts that we've entered as codes. So the first thing you would want to do is open up your quotation manager here, and you want to keep the quotation manager open at all times, right? So you see your Google Earth quotations look a little bit different. They have a different icon to the side here. And then you'd want to open up your code manager as well and keep all of your codes here on the screen at the same time. Okay, I'm not sure what just happened there. There we go. Okay, so the way that you code is you'll notice that Google Earth primary documents don't have a margin area like they might, like you would see in a text document, right? So there's no margin area in the background. So there's no place to code within this general interface here. So what you would want to do is bring open the quotations and have them here, have them already renamed so that you have some familiarity with what that quotation is. So in this case, I might say something more specific than Vancouver. I might say something like Vancouver aerial overview, and then, or if I didn't want to name it that, at least I would put a quotation, or sorry, a comment on the quotation, letting me know what this quotation is, so that when I want to code it, I can say, well, I know that there are high-risk areas. Let's say I have a code for high-risk area, and I just would drag it and drop it right on top of that quotation. So high-risk area might be in Hartford, Connecticut. I know high-risk area might fit this quotation too as well, so where people have high heroin use. Okay, so you have all of these options to drag and drop multiple codes onto these Google Earth quotations. And the way that you would view them, you can either view them in using the query tool, and I'll show you what that looks like. So because the query tool doesn't actually bring open any kind of snapshot of the Google Earth primary document, it will just give you the name and the comment on it. So I'm going to the binoculars here to open up the query tool and say I want to now look at my high-risk area, that code that we just used. So I'll double-click on high-risk area, and then I'll take it out to full content, include comments, and I'll just go to the editor for now. You can always take it out to Word if you want to, but this is what it would look like querying Google Earth quotations. So this is a Google Earth quotation in primary document 5. It's the second quotation in primary document 5, and it gives you the latitude and the longitude. So these are the coordinates of that location. At this point, there are no memos or comments on this on this quotation. But if you look down here, there's another quotation, 5.3, and now we have a little bit of context here because we've added a quotation, or we've added a comment to that quotation. So we not only know that it's Hartford, Connecticut, but we also know we have some semblance, some greater idea of being able to contextualize it. So the more, the richer you add commentary, and the more richly and more intuitively you name your files here, then the more information you'll be able to see using this query tool. You can also, it also queries whatever else has been coded using that code. So this is just a JPEG, a portion of a JPEG picture that I've isolated. I formed a quotation out of that. And then any types of quotes that you have coded with that quotation as well, with that code, any kind of quotations that you have in your text documents that you coded using, for example, high-risk area, you'll be able to see that here as well. So people will be describing the locations that you'll be able to get information about those locations sort of by triangulating what people are saying about them, and then also being able to refer back to them using the naming system and the comments. So the query tool is just one way that you can review Google Earth quotations. Another way that you would do it, which I find to be kind of fun, is that you can select the code itself here and take that code out to the network view. Okay, so you'd have to have the code selected first, take it to the network view, and then you would import quotations associated with it. And if you're unfamiliar with the network view, these are all things that we teach in our basic course, so if I'm going over things that are unfamiliar to you, it might be worthwhile just to get a greater familiarity with the things that you can do in ATLAS.ti using our basic course, and also our advanced course goes through some of these things as well. Alright, so we have our code and we have all of our quotations, and you can see that it has a different icon for the Google Earth quotations than it might for, say, a JPEG or a picture quotation. I don't have any text quotations in here at the moment, but you can always see those as well, and they would be displayed here. So whenever you double-click on a Google Earth quotation here in the network view, you'll see where it says click here to display in context. So it's basically taking you back out to the Google Earth interface, and you can double-click on any of these things, and it will take you to each of those locations, and that's another way to review it, right? And then it will also take you to, if you want to view other types of data that it might be linked to, you can always do that as well. All right, and then, so once you have this network view open, let's go to some of our text data. So if we go to some of our interview data, I'm almost done here. I know we're running a little bit short on time, so what you can do is, I'll just close my quotation manager for now. So say you're reading through an interview and somebody is making some kind of reference to a location that you know you want to, that you coded in Google Earth. What you can do is just drag and drop a quotation directly into the network view, and you can do this for multiple, as many as you want. And the way that you might link it to this quotation is you can just select it here and select this linker, and let's say we want to link it to this one. So effectively what we're doing is creating a hyperlink between two different types of locations in order to triangulate what people are saying about that location to the location itself. And you can define whatever kind of relationship you want those two quotations to have with one another, or you can always create a new one as well. And you would go to new relation. You might say something like is location of, or happened in, something like that, right? Say. And then you click OK. You'd actually have to fill out all of these fields first, but for sake of time, I'm not going to do that. So, but you can create those new types of relationships. Let's just say for the moment that one already exists for what we want. Okay, so you're creating links there, and you can view them at any moment using this network view. So any type of object that you want to, we'll say this network view, high-risk area. Right? So if you go to your quotations now, then if you go down, scroll down to whatever location that you want to look at, let's say, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but you could take it out to the network view itself, and then you would be able to see any kind of quotations that are linked to it there. All right, so that's how you review the quotations. It's very similar to working with other multimedia files as well. And then another thing that you should know is that you want to be able to keep memos on these things. Any location that is really important, it might be worthwhile for you to create a new memo. In this case, we might say high-risk locations, and then click OK. And you can keep this memo open as you're linking things and as you're reading through all of your documents. You want to be keeping notes on what you're finding here. And this is really going to act as a basis for your report if you want to report on these different Google Earth locations. And as long as you keep, you keep writing into this memo in the process of linking and assigning and creating different place marks, just keep this running memo so that by the end of it all, you'll have a pretty rich description of what's going on and what's happening in that particular location. All right, so let's see if I want to cover anything else. So really the main tips and takeaways of this is that you want to create objects in Google Earth first, and that's really highly recommended. And then you would import those as quotations. Okay, so let's just go to this again. I'll just have you look at primary document here. So all of these things will be imported as quotations. Formulate them first in Google Earth. And then you would import them as a KMZ file. You would open that KMZ file in ATLAS.ti, and then once it's in ATLAS.ti, then you can link those quotations to other objects in your HU. Another thing to keep in mind is make sure you rename all of your quotations. Otherwise, they'll all be Google Earth by default. That will be the name of them. Also, make sure that you comment on locations, because these comments will show up in your queries, and they'll just give you additional information about those locations. And the last thing to keep in mind is that you can also interact with other GIS, geo-referencing, geo-coding software. Some of you might be using ArcInfo, and as long as you convert outputs into KMZ files, you can always upload them into ATLAS.ti. But the thing to keep in mind is that you have to first, if you are exporting from something like ArcInfo, you would save it as a KMZ file, upload that into Google Earth, and then upload the Google Earth KMZ file into ATLAS.ti. So you need to keep in mind that ATLAS.ti only interfaces with Google Earth at this point. But you can do that. You can indirectly use other outputs from other programs if you need. All right, so thank you so much for listening to this training session, and I'm happy to take any questions now.
Kristin, I'm going to give the microphone to Andrea. She had a question about privacy.
Okay.
Let me give it to her. Andrea, can you speak? Andrea? Well, looks like she can't. Her microphone is not connected. All right, so I can read this. When you add a quotation, can other people access that info? Such as photographs. You can upload a photograph for others to see in a layer. If others can see it, how do we prevent that to protect confidentiality if necessary?
It's a great question. I've had other people ask me this question as well. So if you're working with really secure data, confidential data, as most of us are, you don't want that data to be able to be available to the rest of the Google Earth community unless you specifically, want that. So whenever you're creating all of these place marks here, they are available only on your computer, but they also exist and necessarily exist on the Google Earth servers. So Google Earth technically owns that information. They have rights over that information. I don't think that there's a very, very low risk of them reproducing that information without your permission. But if you do want to be able to operate within a very secure, confidential server, you can actually set up Google Earth using an account on your own computer, but you would have to. I can send the links to this later on, or maybe I can make them available through the ATLAS.ti Training Center. But it is possible to have the equivalent of all of the Google Earth servers, but on your local computer or on your local server, so that none of this is actually getting transmitted to the Google Earth community or anything like that. So it's all highly confidential, and Google Earth. It's a paid subscription, but it's something like $40, or it's very little money, and it might be worth doing that just to ensure legally that all of your information is secure.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions written here, but anybody would like to ask a question here? You may raise your hand. Well, I have a question for you because, you know, this is my first introduction to to working with Google Earth. So the Bourbon Street tourism, that's a quotation, right?
Right, it
In
becomes a
ATLAS.ti.
quotation.
So
Right,
can you show
exactly.
that to us on ATLAS.ti? Because I wonder how it shows that route that you created. Can that be
Hmm.
seen in ATLAS.ti?
Right. At this point, so right now it's not a quotation. Right now it's
Okay.
sitting there because it's accessing what I just created in Google Earth, and
Okay.
because I didn't actually export it as a KMZ file, what
Okay.
I
I
would
see.
do is create a KMZ file out of my project
First.
folder,
Yeah.
and then I would go and upload it using that assign external
Okay, but
documents function.
basically that kind of how do you call that? The route that you created that is also transformed into that can also be transformed into a quotation.
Exactly. So once it's in
Okay.
there, you would fly to it, and then what you would do is the quotation is whatever you see here on the screen. So now we can create a new quotation out of this. So new from selection,
Yeah.
right? And so it would we'd have to re-inject it, which is a funny term, but
Yeah.
so now it creates this quotation, and now we would go to update Google Earth PD, and it would show
Oh,
up
that's
down
it.
here. Should be showing up down here. I'm not quite sure. Let's see if it's in our quotations here. I'm not quite sure why it's not showing up here. I think we would have to start working within our
Yeah.
primary document first. So I think you have to select primary document first
Okay.
so that it knows where you want to put it.
Right. So basically the point is that that route that you created, and what is the name of that in Google Earth when you create a route from one place to the other?
It's called a path.
The path. So basically the
Hmm.
path can also be transformed in or inserted into ATLAS.ti, and you can explore it as a
Hmm.
quotation.
Exactly. You would have to go to the primary document first
Yeah.
so that it knows, the primary document acts as a storage container for all of your quotations. You would have to go to the primary document first and then fly to it and
Okay.
then create the quotation that
All
way,
right.
and it would be available.
Anybody has any questions at all? We still have 7 more minutes left. Yes, we have here. Thank you so much for an excellent demo. I also received some additional tips for working with text for triangulation. Okay, thank you. Trasinol Car. All right. Let me see anybody else. Okay, yes. Well, your hand is up. I'm going to give you the microphone. Maybe you would like to say something. Your microphone is open.
Oh, I just wanted, I'm sorry, I forgot to put my hand back
No, that's
down,
okay.
but
That's okay.
just thank you. Your review was awesome, and like I was saying, the last part of it really helped with the triangulation for what I'm doing now, because I'm almost finished with some data analysis. So thank you so much.
And
Oh, you're welcome.
are
Thank
you
you.
working with Google Earth?
No, actually I'm not. I did not know that Google Earth could do all of this. I had looked at it before, but for what I'm doing, I actually don't have a need for it, but I
Yeah.
wanted to receive the training just in case there was also something else I could learn. But I'm actually working with ATLAS.ti right now doing some data analysis that I'm just about complete with. So it's a really awesome program to be able to also use the Google Earth as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to give the microphone to somebody else. Fabian or Fabian. Let me see. I'm going to give you the microphone here. It's open. Do you have a microphone?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Ah, all right. Yes, I have a little question, and it's I can't work very well with Google Earth because the rural landscape I'm working on does not well the Google Earth is not providing images from recent times. So that's why I have to work with ArcInfo or ArcGIS, and I didn't get quite clear the idea how can I keep on working the ArcGIS file in ATLAS.ti.
ArcInfo. So import ArcInfo files.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. You're absolutely right. I mean, Google Earth, those pictures have only, they've only taken pictures of really highly developed areas. So you definitely don't have street view for a lot of places. Even in the United States, you don't have street view. So street view only works for wherever, the Google Earth vans have driven through and taken pictures. So in places like Afghanistan or Pakistan or lots of places in India, there aren't there's no really good imagery. And this could be a problem, but if you do have imagery from our ArcInfo or ArcGIS, what you would want to do is be able to create an output and put it in either a KMZ file or a KML file. That just means keyhole markup language. That's what it stands for. And KMZ is just a zipped version of that KML, keyhole markup language. So it's sort of a compressed file, and it's more easily transportable. So if you, I'm not an expert on ArcGIS or ArcInfo, but from what I understand is you can create a kind of output, and as long as it's in that KMZ file, then it's understandable and readable by Google Earth, at which point it would be importable into ATLAS.ti as well.
Thank you, Kristin. I'm going to give the microphone to Monica. Monica, can you speak? Okay, I can read her question. Do I need Google Earth Premium to work with ATLAS.ti?
No, absolutely not. No, Premium just gets rid of ads, basically, and I think it allows you to share more things or something, but I think it basically just gets rid of ads. There's another Google Earth Premium account, but that's the one I was talking about, that allows you to have a server on your local computer so that it increases security. But even working with ATLAS.ti, even working with Google Earth, non-premium, just the regular program, I think that there's very little likelihood that your information will get out into the general community unless you purposely put it on there. What you would do is go to share and then go to share with Google Earth Community, and that's the way that people get those photos and place marks and things on there. But whenever you're creating these things on your local computer, it doesn't necessarily get saved there. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Kristin. And it looks like we don't have any other questions. So I want to thank Kristin very much for her wonderful presentation, and also thank all of you for having attended. We will be having more of these 1-hour free demo webinars on specific applications. We have some scheduled on surveys, on networks, and Kristin will be teaching one on multimedia analysis. I don't recall the specific date, but I think it's around the 20th of what, April, Kristin?
I think it's next Monday, actually.
Oh, next Monday. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so next Monday.
Next Tuesday, sorry.
Next Tuesday then, join us again, and Dr. Kostick will be speaking about working with multimedia documents in ATLAS.ti. So in addition to those what we call special topics webinars, all free 1 hour on specific applications and functions, we're also teaching every week 1 hour free demo webinars that provide an introduction to ATLAS.ti. And of course, if you want to learn ATLAS.ti systematically, well, you are welcome to join us in one of our courses. 6 hours through web conferencing or face-to-face in different cities. We'll be in San Francisco in April, Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Houston, and I don't know if I'm missing anything, Portland, I think. And we don't yet have any courses in Europe and other continents, but we're planning for a course in Madrid, one in London, and one in Berlin the second semester. And finally, you're all invited to this to the first user conference that will take place in Berlin in September of this year. Okay, and that's also for you, Kristin. Okay, any final words, Kristin, before we say goodbye?
No, I just want to say thanks for everybody for attending. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Kristin, and thank you, everybody. And we'll say goodbye now. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.